Hello and welcome back to my channel. In today's video I have my April wrap up, so let's just get right into it. So this month was a very slow reading month for me. It was honestly not a very good reading month for me. I only got through 6 books and they were all 2 or 3 star reads, so not really a great month. So the first book I read was Timid by Devney. This is the, I believe, second book in the Lark Cove series. I read the first one like a while back, so I honestly didn't really remember much of it. But I wanted to give Devney's backlist another shot. I find her older stuff just really doesn't work for me. I hated the Coppersmith Farmhouse. The rest of the series that I did read, I don't know, I might have only read the second book in that series, but I didn't really like that one either. It was just okay. And I'm always so sort of upset by it because I love the Eden series so much that I'm like, how was she capable of this but was writing that? It drives me crazy. This particular book follows Willa and Jackson, and this book honestly, on paper, sounds right up my alley because Willa is this quiet, shy, reserved girl who's always had this crush on Jackson, who is a bartender in this town, in this restaurant that she goes to. And when she is in, I think high school, she has a huge crush on him, but he's a little bit older than her, so nothing was gonna happen. And she goes away for college and kind of doesn't really forget about him, but isn't thinking about him as much. So she goes away for college, and then she's back now when this book is taking place, and her crush is full-fledged back again when she gets back. And I don't know that I loved that aspect. I think on paper, like I said, this book sounded really good, where oh, the quiet girl that he never noticed is he's suddenly going to notice. But I found the way that it sort of played out, I was not a huge fan of, because she's super, like I said, quiet and doesn't talk to him, and he doesn't notice her at all. He thinks her name's Willow. That's how much he doesn't care or notice her. And then one day, out of nowhere, he's suddenly just obsessed with her to the point that he's constantly asking her out and all these things, and it's just I have to have her, blah blah blah. And I was like, I don't know, I just don't see you flipping a switch that quickly from I can't even be bothered to learn this girl's name to she's my future wife kind of thing. And I didn't really love that vibe that I was getting. The guy in this is one of those guys that sort of thinks he's just a player and he's not marriage material and he's not cut out for, being someone's husband and blah blah blah, but for no real reason. He's just no, I could never be married, that would be terrible kind of thing. And I didn't like that throughout the course of this book, he keeps sort of mentioning that this girl deserves the best and blah blah blah, but then he actively admits to himself that that's not him. And so I kind of hated that he was basically just leading her on, knowing that she had never really dated anyone or anything, and he was making her fall for him, knowing that he wasn't really planning on staying with her forever. And that just really bothered me in this book because I just, like I said, felt like he was leading her on the entire time for no reason because he knew it wasn't going anywhere, and yet he consistently led her to believe that it was. And I don't know, I just didn't vibe with that. I gave this 3 stars. And after reading this one, I read a review somewhere that someone said that the third book was their favorite, and so I was like, okay, maybe the third one's better, I'll give it a shot. And I did end up reading that one as well this month. That one is called Tragic, and it follows Kane and Piper. I really did not like this book. I gave it 3 stars, but I honestly think that was generous looking back. I think this was probably a 2-star read for me. I was really excited to read this one because I read the synopsis, and like I said, I had seen people say this was their favorite. I was really pumped about that, ready to get into it, ready to go. The back of this book kind of describes it as this super grumpy guy living in the forest away from everyone because he's got this tragic past and whatever, and she is trying to escape her own sort of life issues, and she decides she's gonna move out to the woods, basically where this guy lives, and they're their only neighbors. And I was kind of thinking okay, it's going to be a slow burn where, she is kind of all peppy and getting on his nerves. He's super grumpy. That was the vibe I was imagining in my head because of the way it's discussed on the back of the book. But I feel we really didn't get that in this at all. I think it's only the second time that these two meet that they're sleeping together. I listened to the audiobook. I thought I had I don't know, touched the screen and jumped 30 chapters or something because I was what is happening right now? These two literally just met. And I was, like I said, expecting this nice slow burn of her wearing him down and his grumpiness and whatever. And we just did not get that at all. They immediately were sleeping together, and I feel like as soon as that happened, I lost interest in the entire story. I was like, okay, I don't care what happens going forward anymore, because like it just doesn't matter to me. I don't know. I've never had that issue before with like a friends to benefits sort of relationship evolution, but I found in this one it was just way too quick. And so like right off the bat with this book, I wasn't really super invested. I actually got through almost the entire audiobook in one sitting just because I was working. It wasn't like it was that good that I just kept going. It's just I was still working, so I kept listening to it. But I only had 2 hours left when I stopped. And I, like 2 days later, went to go start another audiobook because I literally forgot that I was reading this one. And I also pretty much forgot everything that had happened. And I was like, that's probably not a good sign if I can, like, actually forget that I'm in the middle of a book. Like, that's just not great. One of the main issues that I have with Devney Perry's earlier books is the guys in them I don't find are guys that I can root for outside of the realm of dark romance, which is not what she's writing. So that just like doesn't sit well with me. I know if you've been on my channel, you've heard me talk about the Coppersmith Farmhouse and how I gave that book 1 star because I just think that that guy was totally like one big red flag of like get away from him. And yet we were supposed to believe that he was like this super sweet, like swoomy guy, and I was just like not having it. And I found that the guy in this book was a little bit reminiscent of that, where he was very quick to get angry and he didn't handle his emotions well. He was like very quick to choose violence, I felt like, and I personally don't like that in like regular romance. Like I know it has its place for me like in dark romance. I get that. Like I get that that's a totally different thing and that, you know, it fits there. And like I would be totally fine if that were to happen in a dark romance, but because these aren't, I just feel like to me it's just like why are we like glorifying that and making it look like something that we should like, you know, aspire to or want to have or whatever, because I have issues with some of her main guys. I don't know, maybe I'm just like a lot more sensitive to those specific red flags, but I just like, I cannot vibe with them. And this guy was like that. There wasn't a single decision he made in this book that I can actually say I think was the right decision. He honestly was like a child at some points. Like I was just like, this guy has the emotional maturity of a toddler. And I just like couldn't get into it. And like I said, I picked this one up because people had said that this was their favorite. And then I realized after this that people were actually talking about the 4th book, but then I went and read the reviews for the 4th book and people were saying that it was even worse. So I'm thinking that I'm just done with this series and probably with Devney Perry's backlist as a whole, because I just haven't really liked any of them, to be honest. I just really cannot get behind her characters, and the ones that I do kind of like, I kind of feel like they're like just pretty basic, like they're nothing special really. So I'm definitely going to be just like sticking with her Eden series and her new releases going forward because these were just not for me. Next I read King of Wrath by Anna Huang. This I actually got an arc of, but like after it came out. So I did read that, and I don't know. There's something about Anna Huang's books that I really do want to love. Like they have that like glimmer of potential in them where I'm like, oh, this is so close to being like a good book that I would really love, but they just almost always miss the mark. I did like Twisted Hate, and I haven't read Twisted Lies yet, but I think I might like that one. But this one just fell really flat for me, and I think part of it was just my own expectations going into it. I thought this was a mafia book. I feel like I've seen people say this was a mafia book. It definitely isn't, and I find that the blurb almost makes it sound like it is too, where it's talking about how dangerous Dante is and like there's an arranged marriage and like all this stuff, so it sort of sounds like a mafia romance, but it's not. This book follows Dante and Vivian. Dante is basically blackmailed into marrying Vivian, who is the daughter of this guy who owns this like massive like jewelry company, and so Dante's being blackmailed into it, but she doesn't know he's being blackmailed. This is another one that I think had a lot of potential. I think that the plot line could have been really good. Part of what didn't do it for me is I just really hate like high society anything. It's not something I've ever been interested in or aspired to or like wanted to read about. So the fact that this ended up not being mafia and being like just a bunch of rich people basically was really not interesting to me. And like I said, it had potential, but I didn't like that once they kind of move in together and Dante's just kind of being a jerk to her because he doesn't really want to marry her, I found that he disappeared a lot. Like, we didn't actually get to see them really slowly falling for each other, I guess. Like, he is on, like, a month-long business trip, I think, at the beginning of this book, and then he just kind of seems to, like, not be around for a lot of it. And so for me, it felt like it went very quick from, oh, we're moving in and we don't like each other, to them having a conversation being like, what is this between us? And I was like, what is what? Like, you've barely seen each other. And I don't know, it just seemed to, like, jump really quickly from one to the other. I didn't really love that. I gave this 3 stars, and I do think it was, like, 3 stars. I also found that with the Twisted series, I remember saying that it was, like, 5-star smut with a 3-star plot line. And I kind of felt like the smut was actually lacking in this book, which I was kind of surprised by because, like I said, that was something that I felt like Anna Huang did really well in the Twisted series. So I was surprised to see that that had sort of changed from my perspective anyway. I also found, like I said, with Dante, that they make him out on the back of the book to be this, like, really dangerous guy, and they repeated that through the book, like, how dangerous he was and whatever, but we never see him really doing anything super dangerous or crazy. Like, he just, I don't know, there was, like, the odd occasion where, like, something would happen, but it still wasn't, like, that big a deal, really. I don't know. I was just expecting more, like, because people, I felt like, were comparing this to mafia romances and whatever, so I feel like I was a little bit let down by this one. Next, I read Funny You Should Ask by Elissa Sussman. This one I really didn't like. I gave this 2 stars. I am shocked that this was nominated for the best romance of the year last year because this was so bad it wasn't even funny. This book follows this girl, and I know I'm going to pronounce her name wrong because I remember they pronounced it really differently in the audiobook, but for the life of me, I cannot remember how. So I'm going to call her Channy. I know that's not how it's actually pronounced, but that's what it looks like it should be pronounced as, so I don't know. But basically, this follows Channy and Gabe. Gabe is, like, this famous actor, I think, and she interviews him in the past, 10 years ago. And they sort of have this, I think they spend, like, a weekend together, or, like, maybe, like, a couple weeks, like, I don't even know. But she's interviewing him, and they're kind of, like, I think they hook up, and they're, like, talking a lot, kind of like friends, I guess, and then they stop talking, and he goes back to his life, she goes back to hers. But it's now 10 years later, and this is the only article that she ever, like, gets known for. Like, no one pays attention to anything that she writes, except for this one article she did on this celebrity 10 years ago, and she's kind of getting tired of people constantly, like, bringing it up, like it's the only thing she's ever written. But someone asks her to do another interview with him, like, 10 years later, and so she ends up doing it and seeing him again. But you're kind of jumping back and forth, almost like People We Meet on Vacation or Love in Other Words. And the thing for me that really didn't work with this was what makes that sort of storytelling method work in Love in Other Words and People We Meet on Vacation is that the characters dated in the past, or there was, like, romantic involvement, I guess, because I don't know if they dated in People We Meet on Vacation or if they were just friends. But there's, like, you see the build up to them and you're kind of wondering, like, okay, what caused them to break apart? Like, why didn't they work it out? Why aren't they still together? Whereas this book, I found I wasn't wondering that because they weren't really together in the past. Like, she was just interviewing this random guy. And so we're bouncing back and forth between them in the present and them in the past. And in the past, nothing's really happening. In the present, nothing really is happening. So for me, reading this, I kind of just felt like there was no reason why they should have got together. So I wasn't feeling that sort of question of why aren't they together, because I was just like, okay, it's 2 people who met and didn't get together. That's not that crazy of a concept, right? Like, people do that every day. And I found that that really, like, just killed the whole book. And there were, like, these blog posts, like, randomly throughout the book, which I didn't really like. They had nothing to do with the story, and they just kind of put them in there. And this girl goes on and on in the book about what a fabulous writer she is and how she's so great and no one appreciates it and blah, blah, blah. But then, like, when you hear these blog posts or, like, read them, they were very, like, basic, and I was like, okay, maybe you should just stop bragging about what a great writer you are, because if that's what you're putting out there, it's, like, nothing super fabulous. And so I don't know, I really didn't like this book. Like I said, I'm shocked this was nominated for Best Romance because it was so boring, and, like, genuinely, I have not thought about this book once since I finished it. Like, it was just not something that stuck with me. It reminded me almost of, like, a combination of, like, People We Meet on Vacation and To Love Jason Thorne. Like, if you tried to combine those books but didn't do it well, that's what this book reminded me of. And like I said, we're just flashing back and forth between the past and the present where nothing is happening simultaneously in both time areas. And that was just, it was really boring. I really didn't like this one. Then after that, that was where I took like the 3-week break from reading, and I kind of was just like, okay, I'm not going to pick anything up for a while I get some work done and whatever. And then I decided, I was doing some work where I actually could listen to an audiobook, and I was like, okay, I want to listen to something, but not something that is, 5-star potential, basically, because I don't want to ruin it if I am like in a slump, and that's why I'm hating everything. So I decided I was going to do a reread of the Seabreeze series by Abbi Glines, which I read back in 2020. It was one of the first romance series I ever read. It was probably the first interconnected standalone series I had ever read, and I loved them at the time. Like, I ate those books up. I own all of them. They're like my comfort reads. I always go back and read Bad for You and sometimes Just for Now, because those are like my favorite books in the series. But I decided I would actually do like a full reread, which I've never done. And so I started with the first book, Breathe. And I will say, going back, this book did not age particularly well, I guess. I could really pinpoint like why people didn't like this when it came out. It's very, very cheesy and cliche and has a lot of things that people hate in it. Like, I was actually surprised at how often it used like the not like other girls sort of thing in it, and I was like, yikes, that's definitely not something that I picked up on back when I first started reading. But going back, I definitely could see, why people probably don't like this as much. I think it's probably like a 3-star read, like if I were to seriously rate this. Like, I don't know if I were to pick this up now with like fresh eyes and like not have ever read it before and not have that sort of nostalgia attached to it, if I would like it. I'd probably give it 2 stars, to be honest, if I picked this up expecting a 5-star read at this point in time. But I did like going back and, starting the series over. I only got through that one this month. I have read the second one since then, but it was in May. So I'll talk about it in my May wrap up. But I did like this one. It was okay. Like I said, nothing super crazy. It's just like a cheesy, like, pop star romance, basically. Then after that, I decided I was like, maybe I'll attempt a new book. Like, maybe I'm, ready to start reading again. So I picked up If Only You by Chloe Liese, which is the most recent book in the Bergman Brothers series. This one follows Ziggy, who was my favorite character the entire series. I was so excited for her book. And I just kind of felt let down by this one too, to be honest. I think I gave this 3.5 stars. I wanted to love this. Like I said, Ziggy was my favorite, and the previous book, I think Everything for You, it's the one with the red cover, I'm pretty sure it's Everything for You. That one was my favorite book of last year, so I was like really excited to get to another one of these books. And this one I was kind of just like not a super huge fan of. It follows Ziggy and Sebastian. Sebastian is the teammate of Ren from book 2, and he's kind of like the bad boy. He's got all these publicity issues, and Ziggy's the opposite. She's always been seen as like the good girl, and people are treating her like a kid. She always gets stuck at the kids' table at like family dinners and stuff, and she's kind of tired of being seen as this like incapable child. And so she decides that the two of them should be fake friends, because she will help him clean up his image and he will help her basically dirty hers, because she wants to be seen as like an adult that can go out and do all these crazy things that he's doing. And so they form this fake friendship, and obviously like things go from there. But I found that this book, because I've read the whole series, and I know that this is like an issue that sometimes comes up with standalones, but I've never had it to this extent. I feel like we see a lot of Ziggy in the second book, because the main girl in that book is autistic, and so is Ziggy. And so we see the two of them kind of a lot in that book, even though the girl in the second book is obviously dating one of the brothers. And so we see a lot of Ziggy. We hear a lot about her like struggles with autism and the things that bother her and different things. And because I feel like we got so much information about her in that book, I felt like this book kind of seemed very repetitive. Like, a lot of the things she would bring up, I'd be like, okay, I already knew that. Like, I knew that, or like whatever. And it just like wasn't new to me. So I kind of was just like, felt like I was reading the same book over again almost, even though like obviously this entire book is completely different than the second book. But it was just like a lot of information being given to me that I already had. And so I didn't like particularly love that. I also found like, I know the way Chloe Liese writes is very different sort of to a lot of other authors. She definitely like goes out of her way to be inclusive and like, I guess, politically correct in her writing. But I found with this one, the way it was written was almost too like good, I guess. I don't even know if that's like the right word, but this guy is like the bad boy, and he's like with this good girl that is like the sister of one of his teammates, and it's team captain's sister. So he's like, he even goes out of his way to like tell this guy like, I'm not gonna go near her, like I respect her and blah blah. And it just felt very like almost too like by the book. Like there was no drama or anything happening because everyone was just being completely respectful and like, you know, doing the right thing all the time. And it was just kind of boring to read because of that. Like there wasn't anything happening because everyone was just being perfectly, you know, nice and respectful and doing what they were supposed to do. And honestly, I think you could probably say the same about some of the previous books in this series because, like I said, that's just how Chloe Liese writes. She's very careful to be, like, very correct in how she does things. But I just found it didn't lend itself to, like, a great story because there was no, like, mess to it, I guess. Like, it was very straightforward. Everything plays out exactly how it should. It was just, like, okay, like, I get that we want to have, you know, people that are good and do the right thing and like look out for people, but like, I don't know, I need something interesting to read. Like that's just not interesting to read. And so that's kind of how I felt about this book. I don't even know if I'm describing that in a way that makes sense, but I just felt like it was missing something in like the department of like some sort of drama or angst or like anything happening. And so I didn't really love that. Wasn't my favorite in the series, which was disappointing because like I said, Ziggy was my favorite character the entire time. So I was a little bit let down by that. But that was the last book that I read this month. So like I said, hopefully this coming month I will read a lot more and we'll be back into it because I will be done all of the things that I needed to get done. But that is everything for today's video. So thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button down below. I do new book videos every single week, and I will see you next time.